Welcome back to the third lesson for this video editing class at Library in the Dock. You should already have your Premiere project file up to date, but if you haven't followed along with lesson 2, then I'm supplying this ATARI Workshop 3 Premiere project file next to this video so that you can keep up to date. This is what we'll be working with today. So here we are back in Premiere. I've just done a couple of extra cuts throughout this timeline all the way to the end, and you can see towards the end here we actually run out of A cam and we've only got the B cam. So we can't cut A to B cam and perform the same sort of edit. However, if we did want to edit something at the end, there is another way to do it. And this lesson I'm going to explain all about effects, overlays, covering up sections with photos and other motion graphics, and finessing your edit, making it even more engaging. So I'm going to come up to the end here, and I noticed that there was an around about here.
But
so he says he's got an there, which I'd love to edit out, but there's no camera A to cut to. If I did a cut here and cut out that it's going to create a jump cut. But there is a way to make another camera angle out of this. Now I'm going to show you the effects panel, and that is up in the top left up here. And when you click on a clip, it should automatically open up here, effect controls, and the default controls that we have up here are motion and opacity and time remapping. We'll just focus on motion at this stage. Now motion, you can see here that the scale is set to 50%, and if I brought that up to 100, it's going to go back up to its original 4K resolution. And what we did when we right clicked and clicked set to frame size, that brought that down to 50. So we can actually increase this size without losing any quality. We can actually take this all the way up to almost 100. It will still be a really good quality, and that's the benefit of having a 1080p sequence but having source files that are 4K. So to change the scale, we can just click on it and type in another number, say 60, raise it up a bit, or you can click and drag to the right or the left. Now that is quite intense. It can move very quickly, but if you hold down Option while you're dragging, it will move a lot slower. So it's a bit easier to manage. So I'm going to actually take it up to about 75. I think I don't want to go all the way into 100. You can see that the framing of this is not all that great now. He's off to the side and his head's cut off. If we want to move him into a better framing, highlight this motion tab up here, and we can actually just move, click and drag, and reposition him in the frame a little bit. And I'm going to sort of position him just around over there, I think. So now you can see that it's gone from, in the clip before, we've got this sort of angle, and the clip afterwards, it's going into an even tighter shot. So we've essentially made a new camera angle out of one video file, because these are both ATARI CamB.mp4. So let's just review that.
and so now we're really in a pickle. But it's very interesting. Once you have an order, then you start.
So that works. We cut out that completely, and we only used one video file. Well, you can add many other video effects onto your clips within your timeline, and the controls for any effect appear up here. To get to a big library of all of Premiere's effects, we actually come down here into this window at the bottom, and you can see over here we've got effects. So if we click on that, you can see we've got presets, Lumetri presets, audio effects. If you just go down to video effects, you'll see that we've got a whole load of different effects here in different categories. But just to give you an example, here I'll add a Gaussian blur. Now we can either click and drag this over to the right and drop it on the clip, or we can just click and drag it up into the effects controls whilst having that clip highlighted. And that will add that onto the clip. And then anything that you do up here, changing the blurriness, that's going to affect that clip. Now to turn on and off the effect, you can just click on this effects button up here, which will turn that effect on and off. And if you like to reset the effect, any of these little reset buttons here will just reset that effect, or you can click up here and reset the entire effect. If I press reset on motion up here, it's actually going to reset that motion back, everything back to default values, which will reset it back to 100. but I like the cropping, so I'm going to leave that where it is, and I'm going to press delete on this Gaussian blur because we don't want to have a blurry video. One of the really useful effects is under color correction, and that is one that I use on every project, and that is lumetri color down here. And that is an effect that will be able to give a nice color grade to this image, and I think that we should definitely do a color grade because, as you can see on this camera A and the camera B, the colors are slightly different compared from this one. I would say this camera looks slightly green and this camera here looks a little bit more red. So we can match these a little bit better, and we would do that using lumetri color. Now you can just do what I said with that Gaussian blur and drag lumetri color up here into effects, and you'll get that effect, and you can drop down and change everything. But there is actually a better way to do that, and that is to change to the color workspace up the top here. So let's go ahead and click on color, and what that's going to do is give you a whole extra panel down the side here with lumetri color. And this is where you'll do your color grading. So what you'll see, what will happen is if I select this camera A clip here and I move any of the controls over here in the panel, it will automatically add that lumetri color effect over here under the effects controls window. Now I'm going to take that exposure back down. What I'm really concerned with here is matching the colors in between these two images. Now I won't go too far with color grading because it's something that you can spend a lot of time with, and for the purposes of this lesson I'll keep it short. But you can have a little play with all of the different controls in lumetri and other effects. Now you can see what it's done here down in the timeline. It's changed this little effects box to green. When you add an effect to a clip, it turns from yellow to green, and you can see here that when it's just yellow, that means that it doesn't have any effects on it, and when it's green, it's got an effect added. So I can see that these two clips here, I've added effects to these, but the rest don't have any effects on them. I'm going to explain something now about copying and pasting attributes for clips, which is a useful tool to copy this effect on this clip across to other clips. Now if I right click on this clip, I can just copy this file, or I can use the keyboard shortcut Command C to copy that file. Now I can then select the other files in this timeline, which would be that one, and then if I hold Shift and select these other files here by drawing a square, I can then right click on those and choose Paste Attributes. And you can see it brings up this dialog, and I can paste any of the attributes, any of the effects. I can paste the motion, so if we cropped in and reframed, we could paste that motion across. But for now, I think we should paste this lumetri color effect across to all of the other clips in this timeline. So now you can see that this color grade that we've done is going to be active on all of the other A camera clips in the timeline. So we should also do the same thing for that B camera. So we can go Command C, and then we can select all of the other clips in this timeline to paste attributes. Now, you need to be careful that you don't paste attributes onto a clip that already is green, because if you do that, right click, paste attributes, I'm not going to paste motion, I'm just going to paste the lumetri color, and you'll see what happens here. So all of the other ones have turned green. So we've pasted that effect from that B camera across to all of the other clips in this timeline. However, we had this one selected, so that has actually doubled up. So there is now two lumetri colors, and you can see it's too intense, the color correction, and it's doubled up on that. So we're going to just delete that one there. We can just go into the effects panel and delete one. Or another way is to remove attributes. And say I didn't like the color grade in any of these clips. I could just select the entire thing, right click, remove attributes, and you can see here I can remove the motion, I can remove the lumetri color, click OK, and that's actually removed the motion, it's removed everything, removed the effects, removed the lumetri color. But I do like this grade, so I'm going to keep it there, and I'll just delete one of these lumetri colors. Now in the second half of this lesson, I'm going to show you guys how to add in extra material over the top of this interview to make it a bit more engaging. in the original zip file, there were a few extra files. We had these downloaded files here, which were mainly images, but I think there's one video in there of the Pong game created by Atari. Now, we can't actually see what these files are in this list view, so I'm actually going to change this to icon view and go through and find that folder. So if we double click on media and then we double click on downloaded files, now you'll notice that it's actually opened up a new tab up the top here called downloaded files, and it says bin downloaded files. If I go back to the project window here, I'm actually just going to switch that back to list view, so that we've now got our list view here with our sequence, and we've also got downloaded files over here. And in this one we can actually see what they look like. We get a little icon and we can see, so we can sort of pull some files in. Now before we start putting some images onto this interview here, what I like to do is actually duplicate this sequence, and I'm going to leave this sequence untouched at the point that we have it here. Because if we ever want to go back and just see where we were and just watch the interview start to finish, we can always come back to this Atari interview raw, and we know that's just the raw interview start to finish without any overlays on it. So I'm going to right click and hit duplicate, and this time Atari first cut. And this is going to be our first cut of the Atari video. And as we progress, I might duplicate this again and put second cut, and then work our way all the way up to final cut. And it's useful to keep these sequences just in case you need to go back and see the first cut or go back and see the raw interview. So now if you double click on that, you'll notice that the sequence is exactly the same, and I'm actually going to close this tab here, Atari interview raw, so we don't get confused and we're just working with the first cut. Now this bin here, downloaded files, we can start to overlay some of these images over the top of this interview. So if we go back to the start and have a listen.
When we decided to do the consumer Pong game, we took it to the toy fair and we sold none. And we said, what's going on? We know that a lot of people want to buy this. And it turned out that the toy stores didn't sell anything.
So I think it'd be a good idea to start with the interview and start with Nolan Bushnell's face to introduce who he is, and so that the viewer can see who's talking. And I think we should even bring up a little title here saying Nolan Bushnell to introduce Nolan. But then after we introduce him, probably up here at about during this gap here, I think we should introduce a picture of Pong. And I want you to just make sure you're in this bin here, downloaded files. And we've got this Pong arcade game.jpg, and that's a picture of Pong. I think we can just bring that up, drag that straight in here, and you'll see it's brought in an image over the top. If we just switch up to effect controls up the top here, and we have this Pong arcade selected, we can see here that if we drop down motion, it's at 100%. If you right click on that clip and hit set to frame size, you'll see it's going to drop it back down to the right size. But the aspect ratio of this picture is a square, so we end up with these bars on the side. So let's just increase the size a little bit more until we're happy with how it looks. I'm going to actually increase it up to about 73, and remember moving that picture around, we highlight this motion up here and we can just click and drag the Pong around. I'm going to drag it around so that Pong is a little bit more centered in the frame like that. Now I would like to extend this out a little bit, so if we hover our mouse over the end of this clip, the cursor is going to turn into this red icon. Well, let's trim forward up to that join there, up to that edit, and let's review that.
And we sold none. And we said, what's going on? We know that a lot of people want to buy this. And it turned out that the toy stores didn't sell anything that was more.
Okay, so I like the end. I think the start is a little bit funny because it comes in on some silence. So it's always best to sort of bring in an image or do any cut at the start of where somebody's talking. So let's put a cut down here, and we can just select all these things here and hit Command K, and I'm going to delete the little bit beforehand. And this actually gives us the opportunity to trim some of this silence here. So we can actually maybe trim a little bit off. I'm going to select all these, hit Command K once again, and then select these, Option Delete. And then while I'm here, just as a good practice, I'll put an across dissolve on the audio to make sure that there's no clicks and pops there. Now this image is a still image. What if we want to add a little bit of movement to this to make it a bit more dynamic? So let's add a Ken Burns effect to this image. I want you to select the image. Let's go back to the start of that clip, and you'll see when I move the playhead, there's also a little playhead up here that moves forward and back. And this playhead, if you can click and drag that one, bring that playhead back to the start, and we're going to turn on animation for position and scale. Now that's going to set the position and the scale of the image at the start of this clip, at the point that we have it set now. So now if we go to the end of the clip, and we actually need to go one frame before the end of the clip, which is there. See, that's gone on to the next clip. So we're going to this one frame before the end of the clip here, which is the last frame in the clip before it goes on to the next frame, which is down here. And we have this clip selected. We can actually, let's do a little zoom in and reposition of this image. So we don't need to do very much. I don't think you need to go crazy. Remember, holding down Option and clicking and dragging the scale will increase it at a slower rate. So I think I'm just going to go up by maybe 6 or 7. So it went from sort of 75 to 83, so about 8. Now the position has gone kind of off center now, so let's click on motion and we will just resize that so that it looks a bit better there. Keep Pong in the center of the screen. And we can review this. Let's have a look.
And we sold none. And we said, what's going on? We know that a lot of people want to buy this. And it turned out that the toy stores didn't sell anything that were...
Okay, I really like that. I think the end is probably not a great place to cut on this "the", so I'm actually just going to extend that out a bit more up to toy stores. Now, extending it out a bit more meant that our keyframe at the end is not in the right place. So, once again, we'll go to one frame, the last frame in that file, click on JPG, and you can see that our keyframes here are where we had them set, which was a little bit before. So we need to make sure that we move these keyframes all the way up to the end of the file. There we go. And that motion will then continue all the way right to the end. Now I'm going to show you how to create a really basic title in Premiere to introduce Mr. Nolan Bushnell to the viewer. First of all, we're going to go into media here and we're going to create a new bin called title, and we're going to pop a new item in here called a color mat. Now I'm going to make my title background white, so drag down to there, but you can pick whatever color you'd like and press OK, and I'll just call this white mat. And when I drag this into the sequence, you'll see it fills up the whole frame. But what we can then do is grab the crop effect. So if I go to the effects panel and type in crop, now in the search bar, and I'm just going to drag that crop effect on here, and then I can start to bring in the left, or bring down the top, bring up the bottom, and you can see I've got a little bar to pop some text in for the title. Now I can change the opacity on that. Opacity is usually always on with the animation, but I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to just have this slightly opaque at about 70. Now this is perfect for us to put our title on top. Now to add a title, I'm going to go up to Graphics, New Layer, Text, and that's going to give us a new text layer which has been added into Premiere here. Now I'm going to drag it back just like anything else. If I click and drag vector motion, I can reposition this text. Up here in Graphics, you'll see that I can drop down Text, New Layer. I can change the font, keep it as Helvetica light. I can change the fill, I'll make that black. And then if I click Text, New Text Layer, I'll be able to double click on that and change his name, which is Nolan Bushnell. Now I can also underneath add in his title, which is Founder ATARI. Now I know that this looks a bit funny at the moment, but what we can do here is resize that text with scale, and we can play around with that and make it look good. And we can always move the white mat down as well, or move the white mat around so that it looks a bit better. I might move the crop. If I want to move both these layers around at the same time, the long way to do that is to go into each one and move them separately, but they're not going to move around and I'll have to readjust the position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to nest both these layers, which is right click and choose nest. I'm going to call this NOLAN title. And I'm even going to drag that up into title here. We'll keep everything that we need within there. Now what that has done is created a sequence with both those items in it. So if I double click on that sequence, you can see here it is. Here's both those items. So going back to that first cut, I can actually now move this around as I would any other layer, and it will keep them both together. And the other benefit of this is that I can also fade that in at the same rate. So let's have a look.
When we decided to do the consumer Pong game, we took it to the toy fair and we sold none. And we said, what's going on?
Okay, so that's pretty good. Now one last lesson here. I'm going to just show you how to export your video when you're happy with it. And to do that, let's go up to File, Export, Media. And you can see here there is a shortcut called Command M. I usually just use Command M. Once I'm within the sequence here, I press Command M and that will bring up the Export Media dialog. So here we've got export settings. I would usually export in H.264 if it's something for the web, and selecting one of the presets, I'd usually choose Vimeo or YouTube 1080p full HD, and that's going to be perfect to export for YouTube or for Vimeo in full quality, and you won't really notice any difference between what you're viewing in Premiere and the output. If you really want to export for full quality for archiving, I'd probably choose QuickTime, and then I'd probably choose GoPro Cineform or Apple ProRes if you have it. If you click on the output name here, I would place this file under renders, which is one of the 3 folders that we made in the first class, and click save there and just hit export and your video will be created. That concludes the video editing workshops for Library at the Dock. I hope you've got something out of this. There's obviously a lot more to cover in Premiere. It's a very deep piece of software and it can be very hard to get to grips with at first, but if you stick with it, you should be editing professional videos in no time. Thanks for watching.